Boris Johnson is accused of misleading the public and parliament about drink parties that took place at 10 Downing Street in London. And also, NATO inked a deal to bolster its cyber support for Ukraine after a sweeping hacking against Kyiv heightened tension amid fears that Russia could be plotting an invasion. Hello and welcome. This is Viewer Television. My name is Phillips Levin and the World Stories starts now. Hello again, this is World Stories on Viewer Television, and this is where we look at stories hitting the international scene all through this week, and starting with updates on COVID-19. Now, US President Joe Biden says the government will double its purchase of COVID-19 tests with an extra 5 million kits, bringing the total to 1 billion. As the United States struggle against the Omicron variant sweeping the world, Biden urged Americans to wear a good quality mask. However, the White House faces pressure over the lack of easily available COVID tests, stemming efforts to keep schools open and get people to work when Omicron infections are surging.
Free test shipped to your home. And in addition to the 500 million, 500 million tests that are in the process of being acquired to ship to you homes for free, today I'm directing my team to procure an additional 500 million, additional 500 million more tests to distribute for free. I mean, 1 billion tests in total to meet future demand.
Now, as Italy's pushes vaccines with its Green Pass vaccine passport, police arrested 3 nurses who on separate occasions pretended to give patients COVID-19 jabs. Authorities said they arrested a nurse in Palermo who faked vaccinations for people and charged her with forgery and embezzlement. Police says she emptied doses into tissues before sticking the needle into activists' arms. Italian police arrested 2 other healthcare workers on the same grounds in the last 2 months. Police in Italy have arrested several nurses who they say helped anti-vaxxers fake their COVID-19 vaccination status by first draining their syringe before jabbing their arms. And away from COVID updates to the African scene. Now, Uganda has ended the world's longest school closure, ordering millions of students back to the classroom after a gap of nearly 2 years. Some 15 million pupils have not attended schools in Uganda since March 2020, when classrooms were shorted as COVID-19 swept the world. Education Minister John Muyingo said all the students will automatically resume classes a year above where they left off. Muyingo said any private schools demanding fees above pre-pandemic rates will be sanctioned.
Without coming to school, but now I'm very happy to see the children back and to get their friends. They have been missing them.
I'm happy because I was missing my teachers and my study.
There are teachers in private schools that did not receive any pay completely, and others might have maybe abandoned even the profession. So now bridging up that gap still will take some time, and it needs some serious intervention by the government.
Now, still in Africa, thousands of Sudanese protesters took to the streets in the capital Khartoum and other cities in new and increasingly regular demonstrations to demand civil rule in the country. Khartoum State Police issued a statement earlier in the day that announced partial closure of some bridges linking the major cities to Khartoum. Omdurman and Barhi streets protests have become more regular in Khartoum and other cities since January 2nd, when Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok announced his resignation amid a political crisis and wave of protests in the country. Now, several people were killed in a suicide car bomb blast in Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. The attack was claimed by the Al-Shabaab jihadist group, which said in a brief statement that it was targeting foreign officers. It took place only days after Somali leaders agreed on a new timetable for long-delayed elections in the troubled Horn of African country. The government said in a statement on Twitter that it condemned the cowardly suicide attack and gave a toll of 4 dead and 6 wounded.
بعد إنه معناها سوى عرايو خرح من شيء ده بنعد ديب وعن أركب موتو بونس موتو أنا وقت جيب تلا وعقب بيجي سدحنين.
About 20 Chadian rebels and political opponents were freed from the Klesom prison. 22 men who were condemned for treason benefited from the amnesty decree last November. They represent a fraction of the nearly 300 rebel and political dissidents that were granted amnesty last November. As they exited the Klesom penitentiary, which is located southeast of N'Djamena, Muhammad Habu, the Minister of Justice, awaited prior to the inclusion national dialogue that is currently in preparation, and in order to allow all the sons and daughters of Chad to participate, the country's highest authorities have decided to grant amnesty to compatriots for offenses against the integrity of the state and for offenses of opinion. South African police uprooted cannabis plant growing by indigenous activists who have camped outside President Cyril Ramaphosa's office for more than 3 years. Their leader, wearing a traditional lion coat, clung to a shoulder-height plant as police dragged it across the presidential lawn in Pretoria before arresting him. The Khoisan were formerly known as Bushmen or Hottentots, a name coined by Dutch settlers in the 17th century, reflecting the clique's characteristic of their language. The group Tapolin tents have been a fixture in the Emerald Lawn of the South African President's office since 2018, when they began a campaign for official recognition of their languages. A quick reminder, you're watching World Stories on Viewer Television, and when we come back, we'll be looking at Boris Johnson is accused of misleading the public and Parliament about drinks parties that took place at 10 Downing Street in London. We have this and many more after this short break. Well, welcome back on World Stories. Now, an opposition senator was shot dead in Bamenda, a major town western Cameroon where a bloody insurgency has been waged by Anglophone separatists against the state. Lawmaker Henry Kamende, a lawyer and lawmaker of the Social Democratic Front (SDF), one of Cameroon's main opposition parties, whose body was found was killed by unidentified armed assailants, a local communication ministry officials confirmed on conditions of anonymity. Malian Prime Minister has announced that the country will lodge a formal complaint against the economic sanction imposed by ECOWAS and the West African Economic and Monetary Union The announcement was made by Transitional Prime Minister Choguel Maiga during an interview broadcast by the state television channel. During the interview, Choguel Maiga accused former colonial power France of being behind the sanction in an effort to destabilize the country. Despite the accusation, the transitional prime minister said that negotiation was with ECOWAS were ongoing. Referring to the alleged presence of Russian mercenaries in the country, the prime minister dismissed what he described as rumors. After a month of growing diplomatic tension, ECOWAS leaders are agreed to shut borders with Mali and impose a trade embargo. Meanwhile, the Malian ministerial delegations, led by Malian Minister of Foreign Affairs Abdoulaye Diop, met with Mauritanian President Mohamed El Ghazouani in Mouakot as part of Mali's democratic transition plan and the embargo imposed on the country by ECOWAS members. Mali has been soliciting support from regional countries to help in transition despite the ongoing sanctions by ECOWAS. Leaders from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, agreed to sanction Mali last week, imposing a trade embargo and shutting borders in a decision later backed by the United States, the European Union, and former colonial power France, as well as closing borders and imposing a trade embargo. ECOWAS leaders also halted financial aids to Mali and froze the country's assets at the Central Bank of West African States. The sanction threatened to damage our already vulnerable economy in landlocked Mali, one of the world's poorest countries. Mali is already beginning to feel the effect of sanctions. Several airlines, including Air France, have suspended flights to Bamako. The country is also at risk of cash shortage. Kaku Nuboku, commissioner at the West African Economic and Monetary Union, said that it is cut off from the rest of the world. Well, in another news, West African Air Traffic Agency has told Mali that a French military plane violated its airspace amid confusion over the consequences of regional sanctions on Bamako. The Economic Community of West African States agreed to shorter land and air borders with the Sahel state and impose a trade embargo over delayed elections. Mali responded by announcing that it will close its borders to ECOWAS members too. The sanctions on Mali have come after the country's army-dominated government last month proposed staying in power for up to 5 years before restoring democracy. It had previously promised to hold election on February 27th. And away from Africa, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson is fighting for his job. In a perilous moment for his leadership, Boris Johnson is accused of misleading the public and Parliament about drink parties that took place at the 10 Downing Street in London. This is not only facing calls to resign from opposition politicians, but a revolt among members of his own Conservative Party. On top of the revelation about potential COVID breaching gatherings, he has faced pressure on other fronts too, including funding for the flat refurbishment and a row last year in which his government tried to save a Conservative MP who was embroiled in his own scandal. Complicating things further, there has been a barrage of criticism from Mr. Johnson's former top advisor, Dominic Cummings, who has said the Prime Minister was warned about a drinks party in the Downing Street garden prior to events. Conservatives are now weighing up whether the man who helped win the Brexit vote and delivered a handsome majority at the last election is in fact expendable. NATO inked a deal to bolster its cyber support for Ukraine after a sweeping hacking attack against Kyiv heightened tensions amid fear that Russia could be plotting an invasion. Ukraine said that it had evidence Moscow was behind the attack last week, that knocking out government website. But the Kremlin has denied any involvement. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that experts from NATO and its members were already on the ground. working with Ukraine to tackle the latest cyber attack. He said the new agreement will involve enhanced cyber cooperations, including Ukraine access to NATO's malware information sharing platform. The cyber attack on Ukraine last week came as tensions have soared between Moscow and the West over allegations that the Kremlin could be plotting a fresh incursion into its neighbor after massive warcraft and some 100 troops at the border. On good news, all hostages held at the synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, are now safe and physically unharmed, and the suspect is dead after a 10-hour standoff in the Dallas-Fort Worth suburb. Officials say there is no ongoing threat to the community. A 911 call came in at 10:41 a.m. after the gunman entered the Congregation Beth Israel Synagogue during the services and took 4 people hostage. Colleyville Police Chief Michael Miller revealed law enforcement called in a SWAT team and negotiators talked with the hostage takers throughout the day. The man released one hostage around 5 p.m. local time. A special FBI hostage rescue team flew in from Quantico, and the team moved in at 9 p.m. to rescue the 3 remaining hostages, and the suspected hostage taker was left dead. Remember, you're watching World Stories, and after the break, we'll be having more of it. Well, it's good to know you're still with us on World Stories. Now, in the early hours of each morning, Mohajira rushes in freezing temperatures to our modest bakery in the Afghan capital to wait for warm naan bread to be distributed. On some days, it is all her family, and the others who have joined the queue will eat for the day. Afghanistan is in the grip of a humanitarian disaster worsened by the Taliban takeover in August, when Western countries froze international aid and access to assets held abroad. Jobs have dried up, and many government workers have not been paid for months in the country, which was almost entirely dependent on foreign donations under the previous US-backed government. The United Nations has warned that half the country is threatened with food shortages. The bread distribution launch is part of the Save Afghan from Hunger campaign organized by a Kabul University professor. At least 75 families in 7 districts of the capital currently blanketed in snow will receive daily naan ration for a month.
یعنی 1 سال شد که بیخی دیگه وضعیتم خراب است. پیش از خوبم یک لقمه نان ما چیزی میافتم، یعنی مشاورم که دنیمی عمل شد دیگه بیخی زندگی ما خراب شد. تا حد شد که گفت دخترک ما میبرم مفروشم. ما گریان ناله کردم گفتم نه از من دیگه چی مونده غیر خداوند، یعنی مشتککای دیگه یارم بری فروش با من زندگی چی به درد میخوره. من نمیمونم دخترکای مفروشی تا نی اندازه زندگی ما خراب است.
اوس اندغه ترتیب روان کړی دی چې بېوزله او ناتوانه خلک په هغه منطقه کې مونږ کسان نمایندګان لرو چې هغوی د غریبانان راته معرفي کوي او موږ هغوی ته مړۍ ورتوزیع کوو او نور هم داسې نور مواد دي چې غذایي مواد دي چې د هغو هم کومکونه جریان لري او کومکونه ورته رسولي دي.
Now, New Zealand has sent a plane to Tonga to assess the damage after a huge volcanic eruption triggered a tsunami and also sow bisque acid like lean water, food and drugs. The eruption has covered the Pacific Island in ash, cut power and several communications. Up to 80,000
had a significant
people
impact on the foreshore on the northern side of Nuku'alofa, with boats and large boulders washed ashore. Shops along the coast have been damaged and a significant cleanup will be needed.
wreaked significant
Nuku'alofa
damage.
is covered
No
in
death
thick
have been
film of
reported
volcanic
so
dust,
far.
but otherwise conditions are calm and stable. With boats and large boulders washed ashore. Shops along the coast have been damaged and a significant cleanup will be needed. Nuku'alofa is covered in thick film of volcanic dust, but otherwise conditions are calm and stable. Power has been restored to some of Nuku'alofa and local mobile phones, we're advised, are working. However, I would note that we've not yet received news from other coastal areas of Tongatapu or the outer islands.
Now, still on natural disaster, at least 26 people were killed after an earthquake hit western Afghanistan. The victims died when roof of the houses collapsed in Cadiz district in the western province of Baghdad. Spokesman for the province, Baz Mohammad Sawari, told AFP the shallow quake was magnitude 5.3, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. The quake also inflicted damage on the residents of Mark district in the province, but details including casualties were still unavailable. Afghanistan is already in the grip of a humanitarian disaster worsened by Taliban takeover of the country in August, when Western countries froze international aid and access to assets held abroad.
کل خانه از خود ما همسایه هر چی بوده تخریب شده. از یک خانه 3 تا زخمی شده، از یک خانه دیگه 2 تا زخمی شده. دیگه هر چی که داشتیم کلا از زندگی که داشتیم میوه آبادی که داشتیم هم آواره شده که دیگه هر بزیر دیوار خام شده دیگه خودش تنها بدر شده از زیر می خود ما گرنمی دیوالا گرنمی بزیر دیوالا شده که تقریبا 10 دقیقه بزیر دیوالا تنها کله دیوار که بور کشیده نمی اون دیوارا میشه دیگرها و در کدوم نه یک سرای ما تنها جدا هر کدوم یک سرای.
And to Kazakhstan, former Kazakh President Nursultan Nazarbayev said in a video address that there was no conflict among Kazakhstan elite in his first appearance since unrest struck the former Soviet country this month. Several relatives of Nazarbayev have left senior positions in the public sector or at state companies in recent days. Nazarbayev described himself as a pensioner, saying full power was in the hands of President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev. China reaffirmed its opposition to unilateral sanction by the United States against Iran as the Chinese and Iranian foreign minister announced the launch of a 25-year cooperation agreement aimed at strengthening economic and political ties. In a meeting in the city of Wuxi, Jiangsu province, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi also backed efforts to revive a 2015 nuclear deal between major powers and Iran. Wang, who is also state counselor, said the U.S. bore primary responsibility for the ongoing difficulties with Iran, having unilaterally withdrawn from a 2015 nuclear deal between the major powers and Iran. The foreign minister, who earlier in the week met with several counterparts from Gulf Arab countries, concerned about the potential threats from Iran, also said China hopes to set up a dialogue mechanism with Gulf countries to discuss regional security issues. Now, Barbados will hold general elections called by Prime Minister Mia Mottley, the Caribbean nation first vote since it became a republic last year. Currently, 108 candidates compete for the 30 seats in parliament. Mottley's Barbados Labour Party and the opposition Democratic over 3,700 electoral officials will verify the voting process. Electoral and Boundary Commission EBC President Leslie Haynes warned that there will be a delay in the dissemination of results due to COVID-19 protocols. Mottley, whose BLP now controls 29 out of 30 seats, stated the vote will help promote unity in the face of the pandemic, which has heavily hit the country's tourism-focused economy. As of January 18, Barbados had reported at 5,734 coronavirus cases and 269 related deaths. Now, at least 2 people were killed and 22 wounded on Thursday by a bomb blast in a busy shopping district of the Pakistan megacity of Lahore. Police and officials said the attack was claimed by Twitter by a spokesman for the Baloch Nationalist Army, one of several ethnic separatist groups that have been waging an insurgency for years in southwest Pakistan. Thursday blast happened in Old Lahore's busy Anakli shopping district, damaging several motorbikes and upturning market stalls. Baloch separatists previously claimed several attacks on CPAC projects, and thousands of Pakistani security personnel are deployed in the region to counter the violence. Pakistan has suffered a string of blasts and attacks against police since December, when the truce between the government and Pakistani Taliban lapsed. And finally, a stampede killed at least 29 people at a religious event in the suburb of Liberian capital Monrovia. Police said the disaster occurred in the early hours of Thursday, local media revealed. Police spokesman Moses Carter said the death toll was provisionally and may increase. Details about the event remain unclear, as it was a Christian prayer gathering known in Liberia as a crusade held in a football field. Witness Emmanuel Gray, he heard heavy noise towards the end and saw several dead bodies. And that's all on World Stories for today. Thank you for your time and company. My name is Phillips Livin. Do have a great time watching the rest of our programs.